Hello, my name's Ed Poole, and I am a Green Party member, and we currently have our elections for our General Executive, including the Deputy Leader role. And today I'm joined by one of the candidates, Antoinette Fernandez. Hi, Antoinette.
Hello. Hi.
Do you just want to say a little bit about who you are in the Green Party? What's your role?
I am Antoinette Fernandez. I am currently sitting on the National Party's EDI committee. I'm also EDI, one of the two EDI officers for my local party, Hackney Green Party. I'm not a councillor just yet, but I'm working on it. And yeah, that's essentially me. Hi. I've been a member for 14 years, only got active at the end of 2022.
Why did you join the Green Party, and why do you think other people should?
I joined the Green Party because I was getting very frustrated with not just my life, but what I was seeing happening to other people's lives as well. And the sense that, protesting wasn't enough. And I wanted to put myself in a position where I could at least be a part of a movement that was doing something to make society better, to improve our standards of the standards of our lives. Do you know what I mean? The quality of our lives. I think I became active. I think the more important question is, why did I become active, right? Because a lot of people join the party because they just want to show support. But I became active for the reasons I've just mentioned. And also as a result of, partially as a result of the sort of mini civil rights movement we kind of had after the murder of George Floyd. And going on those sort of Black Lives Matter marches and protests, and just thinking that now is the time to really step up and to start advocating, not just for the people in my community, creative industry, but also, for Black people, and for the way in which Black people are treated, not just in America, but also in England. And I think that other people should join the party because it isn't enough to just turn up and vote anymore. You really need to actively try and help parties and movements that are trying to do the right thing, because we are up against it now with the rise of the right, with the madness that America is throwing itself into. We all need to step up and do as much as we can.
How do we balance the need for infrastructure projects with protecting the environment?
You've just gone very quiet there. Balance the need for infrastructure projects whilst protecting the environment. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is like HS2. You know what I mean? Because HS2 is a really good example of very necessary infrastructure, which I think will be really beneficial to us for things like, housing crisis, for example. If it can ease people's commutes, they won't need to live in metropolitan areas, so that they can not put more pressure on housing, and so that will help to disincentivize people using housing as a commodity, because there won't be such a demand for it. So it's really, really necessary for lots of reasons, housing crisis just being one of them. But again, it is unfortunately having a really devastating impact on habitats, on our green spaces. But it's not going to go away. We can't, it's happening, it's going to happen. So what we need to try and do is, as much as possible, regulate where it's being built, try and put pressure on developers to not build it on habitats, to be flexible. And also, I guess there's also the cost of it as well. That money could be better spent elsewhere. So trying to sort of curtail the spending on that also. I don't feel like I've answered that so well. I mean, I think what I'm trying to say is it is inevitable, sadly, that it's going to have a detrimental impact on the environment. But I'm hoping that in the long run, that'll get balanced out by the fact that it will stop a lot of detrimental impact on the environment.
The UK Supreme Court has ruled that for the purpose of the Equality Act 2010, the definition of sex is biological sex, not gender identity. What's your position on that?
Well, I mean, I found it really heartbreaking that it had such a negative impact on trans people. And I think that it's really unacceptable that anyone should feel afraid of using public services and be put in a position where they are going to be exposed to prejudice, right? And I think that the was it the ruling? No, it was the guidance by the ECHR, so the European Commission of Human Rights, right? The guidance they put out, I think, really exacerbated the potential for attacks on trans people, on trans rights. And I think it needs to be, redrawn or withdrawn even, you know what I mean? Because I think anything that puts people at risk, enables people to experience prejudice, discrimination is not acceptable. So yeah, I think we need to look very carefully at that, and we need to take into account people's needs, everyone's needs. Yeah.
What do you say when people ask you how we should fund public services and investment?
I mean, the Green Party has been saying this loud and clear and repeatedly, that we need to tax the super wealthy. We need to tax their assets specifically, right? If we do that, there will be a lot of money to spend on public services. I think also we need to make sure that money is allocated to public services. There's a lot of money there without even having to tax the super wealthy. We do need to do that. But even before doing that, there's still a lot of money, but it's just being allocated to craziness like, arming Israel and so on. Maybe we stop doing that and we put the money where it's needed, public services, benefits for disabled people and so on. Our society will be greatly improved.
What do you think the UK's relationship to NATO should be?
I think that we should leave NATO. I think that NATO's impact on the global south has been devastating. I think that it has been used as a tool for global north interests in the global south. It is purportedly an alliance, a defense alliance, but I don't think it is. I think it could potentially be used to ignite a third world war. I think that it's also potentially a puppet of the US and more interested in working in the interests of the US. And I think that what we should be doing instead of being a part of NATO is investing in peace, promoting diplomacy, doing everything we can to create global alliances to prevent us having to go to war. And I think also our relationship with the US puts us at risk of going to war with other countries. And I think that NATO, obviously it looks like the US might be leaving NATO, but I think that NATO is incredibly problematic. And I don't believe that we'll be able to restructure it by being a part of it.
What is your feeling on electoral pacts and working with other organisations and candidates?
I think it's really, first and foremost, I think it's really important that we are as united as we can be in the left political parties. Absolutely. However, I think we have to be really, really careful about helping another left party to grow, right? Here in Hackney, we have our 3 councillors have an alliance with 3 independent councillors. And I think that, it clearly works really well within the council, when we join up together to lobby for certain policies and to hold our Labour-run council to account, it works perfectly then. However, when it comes to elections, I agree in not running against independent councillors who we have an alliance with, not running against their seats. However, when it comes to their target seats, I absolutely think that we should not have an alliance that affects our ability to gain more seats. And I think that that has become a bit of a grey area. I also think that one size doesn't fit all. And so each local council, each area needs to take into consideration the landscape they're in, who their independent councillors are, and if it's wise to work with them, they should do that. But I think we should definitely not, give them the benefit of the doubt and hope that if we're nice to them, they may join our party. I don't think they're going to do that. We now have, there's a new independent party starting up, so we do need to be very, very careful about how much assistance we give independent councillors now. But yeah, I think as much as possible, we should try and work together with them, but we should be very wary and remember that we are a political party and we have a duty to our members and our voters to represent them.
How do you think we can better convey the urgency and impact of the climate crisis?
I think there's 2 things we need to do. I think the first one, we need to take the onus off the individual and really attack, lobby against, encourage people to boycott the biggest offenders, the companies, the corporations, and the countries that are the biggest offenders. And secondly, I think we need to stop making it such an existential threat. I think it's really important to make people aware that this isn't something that's going to affect their children or their grandchildren. It's affecting us now, right? And I think the Green Party, we've already done this, where we have the sort of called out the heat wave as the heat wave that is unbearable, that we're not prepared for, that our buildings are not created to handle, is as a result of the climate crisis. So we need to, it's affecting us right now. We need to start working towards, I mean, we can't stop it, but we can alleviate it. So we need to, start doing that. And I think that's the most important message that we can use. I think people need a kick to the derrière, pardon my French. And that's kind of the only way people will really sort of start to take it seriously. And I think also emphasizing the fact that it is intertwined with social justice issues, that, the issues that, people often too focus on their day-to-day trials and tribulations. How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to put food on the table? Well, the climate crisis is going to affect that. It's going to affect our food. We've had one of the driest springs in decades, right? And that is going to affect our water, because our water companies, corrupt gangsters that they are, haven't built any reservoirs. So, if we have a drought, we're totally screwed. And again, it's going to affect our food production. These are things that directly affect our everyday lives, right? So that's what we need to do. We need to really sort of make people aware of the direct impact it has on their lives.
How would you, as deputy leader, support getting Greens off the ground in areas with little or no Green Party at the moment?
Well, as I said in one of my videos, I'm really keen to actually go and visit as many local parties around the country as possible, to listen to them, to understand the issues that they're facing, and as much as I can, give them some advice and try and help them to reach communities that aren't inclined towards voting for our party, getting involved with our party. I think also voting for someone like myself to be a representative will help appeal to people, because it's a new face, a different kind of Green Party politician, and I think that is something the party desperately needs. Yeah, a little bit of charisma will go a long way, and I think that if I am able to be deputy leader and I am able to go and visit all these local parties, I'm more than happy to meet with locals and residents and talk to them.
We don't have a whip system in the Green Party. How would you manage the difference between your personal views and Green Party policy?
I consider myself, when I'm, even without being an elected representative, even when I'm just sort of talking on behalf of the Green, representing the Green Party, I always consider myself to be mandated by our policies as voted in by our members, because they are voted in by our members. So as far as I'm concerned, if whatever Green Party policy is, that's what I'm going to advocate for, right? And it's just as simple as that. Green Party policy, it's voted in by members. Therefore, as a representative of the Green Party, you are mandated by those policies.
How do you think we can make a bigger impact with the media?
I'm going to echo what I said in one of the previous questions, is by, electing leaders who can engage with the public, interest the public, and that in turn will get the media more interested in us, right? Supply and demand. If the public are curious about you, the media are going to be curious too. And I think that I think I've kind of proven that already with sort of the Evening Standard article about me during the general election, where I had like a double-page spread, lifestyle spread in the Evening Standard. People are curious about my background, about my history. And therefore media is like, okay, this is someone that we're going to focus on, right? That's what the media wants. They want charismatic people. And then if you're charismatic, they're going to be more likely to listen to Green Party policy, right? It's not enough just to know your policy and be a bit nerdy and, intellectual. You need to be someone that will capture the curiosity and the interest of the public, and then the media as a result. Being personable, being human, being relatable is really important. Like, I think, not being too slick, not being a typical polished politician, I don't think people want that. I don't think the media want that. And I think also, even if they did, that's not how we're going to gain media attention. We need to be different from the other parties. We need to, be humane, be a little bit quirky, and not be afraid of that, and not be afraid of making mistakes and saying things that people may not necessarily want to agree with. But if we have interesting characters delivering this, it'll go a long way.
What do you think of the Green Party electoral strategy known as Target to Win?
I've had my struggles with the numerous campaigns I've done. I've clashed heads with my campaign election coordinator and so on, because I understand that Target to Win is proven to be beneficial and to win elections. But I do think that, especially in urban areas, especially in cities, especially in somewhere like Hackney, what happens is you end up missing out a massive chunk of the electorate, and that's not acceptable. Especially people who aren't registered to vote, people who are disinclined to vote, people who are disinclined to vote Green. Those are exactly the kind of people that we need to make a point of reaching out to and talking to. So what I found now, the long campaign leading up to the local elections in 2026, what I've done is I've sort of fought very hard to use 60-second surveys for as much as possible, because that enables us to knock on every single door in a ward. And I think that is essential. And I have found, through doing that, I've managed to convince people to not just register to vote, but to actually vote for us as well. So yes, Target to Win is essentially great, but it needs to be tweaked. It needs to be adaptable. It cannot just be, that's nothing, it's a bit rigid, and I don't like the rigidity of it. So it needs to be more flexible. It needs to incorporate different regions and the requirements for different regions.
What is your approach to people you disagree with?
I think it's really important to listen to people, to have conversations with people, to not be afraid of voicing your opinion. And also, I think it's important to, when you're listening to people, talking to people, try to understand what their perspective is, why they think the way they think, right? Try and give them solutions. Going back to my campaigning for next year's local elections, through the 60-second surveys, was knocking on some doors in one of the council estates in Hackney, and I spoke to a white working class man in his 60s, reform voter, very my boy Farage. And I spoke, and he was, I'd never vote for you, never vote for Greens, 20 minutes later, you know what, I'm going to vote for you. I'll vote for you in the local elections. I mean, he's obviously not going to join the Green Party and he's not going to become active, but I believe when he says that he's going to vote for me, you know what I mean? So that's how I handle people who disagree with me. I smart, I listen, I give them solutions. I try to help them to understand where I'm coming from. I try to understand where they're coming from and reach a compromise, you know what I mean? An understanding, because at the end of the day, we're never going to have society or world that everyone agrees on the same things. As much as that should be the case for certain things, it isn't, and it never will be. So we do need to learn how to live with people and how to communicate with them and help them to understand.
What Green Party policy would you change?
I mean, I was quite disappointed with our manifesto, 2024 manifesto, with regards to minorities, especially specifically with regards to Black Britons. So I think that what I would change would be, I would want us to really focus on reparations, not just for the transatlantic slave trade of Africans, but also on colonialism. I think we need to have a whole section on that and on institutional racism in this country. I'm aware that before I became active, the then Greens of Colour, which have now been changed to Global Majority Greens, and Young Greens did a lot of work, really good work on reparations. I think it's 3 or 4 years ago. And I think we need to improve on that. And I think we need to make a really strong policy talking about our position on reparations, and how they will manifest, from cancelling global debt to investing in infrastructure and healthcare, returning money. we're all aware, or we should all be aware of the fact that slave owners were being paid back up until 2015 through our taxes. So if we were able to do that, we should be able to pay the people that were enslaved in the countries. And also, I think really important to state things like, education in our own country, and educating, making sure that it is compulsory to teach people about the transatlantic slave trade, and also about colonialism and empire, and the impact it not only had on especially African countries, but is continuing to still have. They are still being exploited by the global north, by the West. So I would like to see some policies covering that. I think that's probably more than one policy. Actually, we need to have a policy about institutional racism in this country and our solutions for it. And we need to have another policy around reparations. And also, I think specifically about ex-British colonies, like up until I think the 60s or so, if you were born in a British colony, you were considered to be a British citizen, and therefore you had, you could have visa-free travel to Britain. We need to talk about things like that. Why was that cancelled? It shouldn't have been cancelled. Both my parents were born in a British colony. Do you know what I mean? They were British citizens. To now say that they're not anymore, I think is disgraceful, and would also go a long way to alleviating the issues surrounding Windrush as well. You know what I mean? So I think it is really important that our party create clear policies dealing with Black Britons, dealing with institutional racism, dealing with colonialism and transatlantic slave trade of Africans.
The Green Party has a reputation for a lack of racial diversity. How do we attract non-white members and voters to the Green Party?
I mean, I don't want to state the obvious here. Okay, so, but obviously supporting diverse candidates, Global South candidates, supporting them, promoting them, electing people from the Global South to leadership positions. If you build it, they will come. If we show people that we support people from the Global South and we support our minorities, then they'll be like, okay, this is a party that speaks to me, that advocates for me. I'm going to get involved. I'm going to vote for this party, right? If we keep showing white people, keep electing white people, that's not going to cut it at all. And I think it potentially is as simple as that. You know what I mean? I think we've got a big, people always want to try and, find new people from diverse communities. It's like, well, you already have a lot of people in the party. Support the people that are here. Get behind us. Promote us. That's how it'll happen. I think it's also important. There's a lot of well-meaning white Green Party members that want to talk about diversity and all this stuff. And it's like, it's really important that people sit down and be quiet and listen. And again, try and curtail their own ambitions, to try and support the people that they talk about wanting to help. But actually, when push comes to shove, it can be very hard, I think, to balance, your ambitions with your desire to be actively anti-racist. So I think that's something people need to think about too.
How can we assure disabled people that the Green Party is listening to them?
We need to show up for them. We need to turn up to events, to protests. We need to support our MPs like Sean Berry when they advocate for them in Parliament, and Sean's been doing a really good job at that. We need to make sure that our events, our conferences are accessible to people, to disabled people. And again, the same old boring response, we need to listen to them. But yeah, and I think, and just get involved with them, and turn up. I've just joined on Instagram, I joined Crips Against Cuts, even just little simple things like that, just sort of joining groups, finding out what they're up to. And I hope to attend one of their protests as well, and be in solidarity with them. It is just that simple, just being there, being vocal, being present.
Great. How important is social class in politics?
Our country is obsessed with class. So obviously, it's a part and parcel of our politics. But I think that we shouldn't pander to it. I think if we pander to it, that exacerbates the problem. And I think that we can be inclusive without sort of, actively trying to appeal to particular classes. I think that if we our policies are strong enough to stand on their own 2 feet, and our policies are universal, which should appeal to everyone. And I think that if we make sure that we have a good diverse range of activists and people, elected leaders and elected councillors, whatever, and we are representative of all the classes, then that shouldn't be a problem. You know, I'm really reluctant for us to sort of specifically focus on working class people, you know what I mean? Because that is a form of classism of itself, right? I've had someone argue with me and say, well, classism doesn't go both ways. It absolutely does. So we need to be careful not to fall into that trap of classism, of this class is more important than another class, because that's not the case. We are a political party. We're here to represent every single person in this country, irrespective of their class, their race, their gender, their religion, right? And I think that's really important. And especially if we are going to start having factions and so on, I think we need to be very, very careful about not being classist.
What other issues are important to you?
Well, I've already spoken a lot about colonialism and Black Britons and institutional racism. I've recently spent a lot of time scrutinising the police and institutional racism in the police, misogyny in the police. I'm also really, really concerned about artificial intelligence. I come from a creative background, and AI has decimated, absolutely devastated the creative industries, and that is not acceptable. And I know that we have you know, some policies that sort of, I think, kind of skirt around the issue. We talk about, you know, protecting copyright, you know what I mean, and all that kind of stuff. And we talk about sort of legislation or whatever, but I think it needs to be, I think that AI needs to be banned from the creative industries completely. I know it's a useful tool in other industries, but when it comes to creative industries, it needs to be banned. So that's something that I would definitely want to lobby against and trying to encourage making it legal. Because I think to be creative, even if you're not doing it as a job, as a career, we all need to express ourselves creatively, and to enable a machine to do that instead just makes no sense whatsoever. And I don't believe that AI will ever be better than the human mind, the human heart, right? So I just think it has no place in the arts. So I'm clearly very passionate about that.
I was going to start talking about AI then, but that's not much. I'm not here to be rude.
You agree with me, don't you? I sincerely hope you do. I mean, it's devastating the creative industries and impoverishing people who have been lucky enough to actually get a career in the first place. You know, it's exacerbating the competition. It's horrific.
Well, I think the point of creative endeavor is to communicate to people. And if a machine is making stuff up, nobody's communicating to you. It's just kind of nicking stuff from all over the place. Identikit stuff, it's stolen from somewhere. You're not learning anything about another person.
And also, but it's also as well about different ways of perceiving our society and coming up with new ways in which our society can go, right? I mean, like, I've always felt like with science fiction and fantasy that it has, these are the people that created our society. They came up with computers and cloning and all these things that we now have, right? I mean, this is the human imagination. We have our ability to create our environment, you know what I mean? To model our environment through our imaginations.
Why do you think you should be deputy leader, and what would you do if you're elected?
I'm going to start with the latter half of that. If I were elected, one of the things I would do internally, as I said in some of my videos, I think unity in our party is incredibly important. The left has a tendency to tear itself apart, and I think what I would try to do to encourage unity is to try and create a space where we can discuss our differences of opinions without fear, you know, where we can have conversations and debates without fear. I think that is really important. I think that is a major step to unifying us, right? True freedom of speech, true freedom of understanding without any sort of insane repercussions, right? Also supporting our staff as well, making sure our staff are well paid. I know there's nothing I can directly do about it, but listen to them, lobby for them, because they are, alongside the volunteers, the backbone of our party, and ensuring things like, you know, and trying to encourage support of our staff, support of our volunteers, support of our minority candidates and councillors, just create a really supportive, understanding, empathetic environment, which, we have, but to improve on that. Externally, again, engaging with the media, doing more interviews, capturing the imagination of the public, encouraging the media to interview me, to talk about me, so I can talk about us and promote our policies. And again, like I mentioned earlier, going around to local parties, listening to people, giving them the support that they need, promoting them as well, trying to maybe get more media attention to our local parties and the wonderful things that people are doing, endeavours that people are doing locally across the country. And then the first half of that question was, why vote for me? Well, because of all the things I've just mentioned. And again, also, I believe I'm right in saying that I'm like the first Black woman to put herself forward, right? That's appalling. And we are a strong left party. We should absolutely have diverse leadership. And you can't get more diverse than a Black woman. Black women are often seen at the very bottom of the societal pile, right? So to promote a Black woman shows that we genuinely care about the people that we say we want to represent, the most vulnerable people in society. I hate to put Black women in that category, but unfortunately, it's the truth. We are quite often amongst the most vulnerable people in society. So by lifting a Black woman, putting for your support behind a Black woman and making her your deputy leader, that is sending a very, very strong message to absolutely everyone in this country. Because if you help the most vulnerable people in society, everybody benefits, right? And women, and Black women, are at the very bottom of our societal pile. We still have so much going against us. So I think to promote us, to support us, would be incredibly beneficial to our party, and it would attract a lot of people, not just to vote for us, but also, I believe, to join up. I've already had people in the comments of my social justice videos have done really, really well on TikTok, saying, oh my God, well, I've never seen a Black Green Party politician before. I'm definitely going to join up. Other people said, look, if you do become deputy leader, then I'll join. You know what I mean? So a lot of people are watching very closely to see what the members decide to do, who the members decide to throw their support behind, because it sends a message, and I think that you could do a lot worse than to support me. I think that I would be a really good public-facing figure for the party. Yeah, put your faith in me. Proof's in the pudding, as they say.